I'm Joan Menard. I'm the chair of the Jacob Edwards Library Board of Trustees, and I'd like to welcome you here this morning for this legislative breakfast. Thank you all so much for getting up early and coming in on this rainy day. I hope you are enjoying our exhibits here in the library. We're quite proud of the facility and the programming that the director, Margaret Morrissey, and the staff are able to provide. And I just wanted to share with you one thing this morning. We recently completed our 5-year long-range plan, and I have a copy of it here. And I wish I had a big blow-up to show to you, but perhaps you can see this graphic image, which is called a wordle, W-O-R-D-L-E. And the wordle on the long-range plan is meant to complete the sentence that is our vision statement, which is that the Jacob Edwards Library is the community place to be. And in the wordle, you see it says literate, curious, creative, collaborative, learned, artistic, quiet, loud, all these words, whatever words come to you when you complete the sentence. The library is the community place to be, and we truly think of ourselves that way, and welcome everyone to join in that thought with us. So again, thank you for coming. And I'd like to begin by introducing the town manager, Christopher Clark. Thank you for joining us this morning, Chris.
I've been town manager for coming up on 4 years, and it's interesting in those 4 years that how much the community has changed. And I just think that we really have progressed quite a bit in that time. Obviously, nothing gets done by just one individual, but I think that the town council has worked very hard to progress the community forward. I think that Senator Moore and Representative Durant have helped the community to progress forward. In terms of some of the concrete steps that we've taken, we have a new middle high school that is nearing completion. That's a $76 million project, 80% of which is funded by the state. So our cooperation, our partnership with the state, I think will yield positive benefits for the community as we move forward. Obviously, during these fiscal times, we've had significant struggles, and I think that we've been able to weather those struggles fairly effectively. And one of those things is that we are a blue-collar community, and one of the things about blue-collar communities is that not everyone has the access to technology at their home. And I think having a library that is progressive, a library that acts as a social center, as a technology center, and as a cultural center for the community is vitally important. And that has shown itself through in the budget process, that we have been able to retain the staff. We've been able to progress in some areas. So we do offer a refuge to the residents of this community by giving them the opportunity to have access to the internet, have access to cultural opportunities. This past summer, we actually did a Project Bread, so youth in the community that wouldn't have otherwise had a chance to have food. The library director, Margaret Morrissey, who is a tremendous director, took that up and made sure that we had an opportunity to have kids be able to come into the community, come into this facility and get some bread and food. And that's just one thing that I think that speaks to, it's not just about doing the basics, it's about doing extra. And I think that that's a story, that's a good story of this community. It's a community that really is taking pride in itself and trying to do extra. So it's with great pleasure that as the town manager in this community, this wonderful community, that we get to host the legislative breakfast this morning. And I know two of our speakers who I've had interaction with extensively, Senator Moore and Representative Durant are here. I know we have several other invited guests, and hopefully that we'll have some of those folks also be able to come up. But I guess it's my honor and opportunity to introduce Senator Moore. Welcome to Southbridge, Senator.
Thanks very much, Chris, and I'm pleased to be back in town. I was here yesterday, so it's not like I'm on foreign travel. And I want to recognize my colleague from Milford, Representative John Fernandes, who's over here. We have I think it's kind of an interesting that the legislators who live the furthest are here and on time. The middle crop still will send out search parties for them, maybe they had other duties to milk the cows and get other things done before they got here, but nevertheless, Representative Fernandes, who came all the way from Milford on the eastern front, and Representative Durant, who's come all the way from Spencer on the western front. So we're coming from angles, and we know the others are somewhere out there. We'll send out a search party and bring them in. I also just want to recognize my former colleague in the state Senate, Andy Nuciforo, who's here. Andy's running for Congress in the district that starts in Dudley and goes to New York, basically. And so he's passing through. This is foreign travel for Andy, I think, because he's from Pittsfield, actually, originally, and I guess still at home is there. I found an interesting quote that I think is from a former Senate president. John Fernandes thinks I served with Horace Mann, but he said, "A house without books is like a room without windows. No man has a right to bring up children without surrounding them with books. Children learn to read being in the presence of books," and I think it's not only children, but we all benefit from the presence of books and all of the other things that libraries do. It's maybe books, when it was on clay tablets, was all what libraries did, but it certainly has changed dramatically in the last decade or so. And I want to commend all of you, both the librarians and the library trustees and supporters of the libraries, for the leadership role that libraries have played during this last recession, especially. It has been the community center in just about every town. It has been a place where many of our folks who are unemployed or underemployed have been able to come and get their resumes up to speed, do job searches, really communicate with those prospective employers, as well as for children and others. And during the dark days that National Grid visited upon us in the fall, oftentimes a place for many of the libraries tended to be a place that still had internet connection and power, and that's particularly important during difficult times as well. So the libraries have served more than, I think, the traditional role that people envision for libraries, and have become particularly critical. This month, we're getting close to the time when we commemorate the day when the shot was fired that heard around the world, but there was one fired in Franklin, not in my district, fortunately, earlier this week, when they were announced that they would be decertified because of the reductions in community support, particularly for libraries. I do have one library, Millville, that is decertified as well for the same reason. And that, I think, is a very serious step that has been taken, and I hope that the communities will revisit that issue, and certainly the state will do what we can on that. The library support has dropped in the last decade 39%, and yet increased use of average of 50%. So the usage has gone up and the state support has dropped, and that's something that we hope we can see some revision to that in the coming years, but it's still a difficult time. We're not out of the woods yet economically, but it is one that we need to continue to put pressure on. And I don't know how many groups that have come to see me about budget issues. I serve on Senate Ways and Means, but of course Senator Brewer from the next district over is the one that you want to call all the time for funding, we need to continue to improve that. But I've told other groups that what they need to do is to bring their lobbying to the grassroots. We get all these groups up, storming around the State House, and you sometimes feel like the Tsar in the Winter Palace with all the chanting and drums beating and everything else. But it's more important that the communication take place here, because we need to know and understand how our constituents are benefiting from whatever the state provides in the way of resources. And this kind of an event, which has been going on now for, I don't know, 7 or 8 years, I think at least, of getting all of the library supporters together in one of the libraries in each senatorial district around the state, is a good way to communicate that information about what the local library needs, about the regional library system, about the talking book program, about the State Board of Library Commissioners and what they do. We even have an issue, and we've had to battle off and on to try to keep the state library open. The administration has sometimes defunded or significantly cut that program, and that's a very vital program for a lot of us, certainly, and certainly in the greater Boston area, but really beyond as well. So we've got, it's a battle because it's a battle of resources, a lot of competing needs, most of which are very good and very important. But this is one that we don't want to keep eroding, and we want to continue to make sure that as we do have opportunities to provide additional funding, that libraries are part of that picture, and all of the services that are provided that are used to keep the libraries connected to the world are also important. So I congratulate you for the work you've done. I know we've got a lot more to do, especially to make sure that we have a part of the growth back in it. I know both of my colleagues and our absent brethren from the House have all indicated support over the years for libraries, and I hope they will continue to do that. So I thank you for coming. It's a great turnout of the library supporters, and certainly you have some sympathetic ears among the legislative delegation in this district, and we will continue to be that way. Thanks. Listen, I think I should go with seniority and start with Representative Fernandes, and then we'll get to Representative Durant, because Representative Fernandes has been there a couple more years. You notice his hair was the same as Peter's when he went into the House. Give Peter another term, and he'll be gray, and then he'll lose it all after that. But Representative John Fernandes.
Good morning. It is a great turnout, and thank you all for being here. To the Senator's point, I am a member of the Legislative Library Caucus. It is a group of legislators, and there are many caucuses that focus on particular issues, and we have to be careful what we pick and choose, because we can't be advocating for everything to Ways and Means and find the inability to be credible on the things that we think are important. So these are the kinds of things that I get involved in carefully, but libraries have always been very important to me. I was thinking as the Senator was speaking about libraries and their place in my own history versus where they are today for my children. I sort of have this memory of walking into a library and feeling like I was walking into a church. Quiet, big rooms, people being reflective. But the memory difference that I have from what my children experience today is I walked into the library looking for information that I felt was kind of hidden behind a curtain, that I couldn't get at unless the librarian helped me get at it. So it was me trying to get knowledge that I could then utilize for whatever purpose I might be there, whether it was researching a paper or just studying a particular issue. Today, I had dinner with my son last night, who's a senior at Boston College, and he's working on a senior thesis, an economics thesis, and he's getting his data together. His problem today is not data collection. He can get everything he wants. He happens to be doing it on a particularly, what I thought was interesting issue, trying to correlate revenue for sports teams to their success in terms of points scored. Does revenue go up for a particular score? How many points result in what revenue? Now, if you want to research data on sports teams, you don't need to go to the library for it. It's all over the internet. But what he and I were talking about last night was the issue of how do you now separate the real from the false? How do you assess that information for its credibility and relevance to what you're doing? And I think one of the changes, one of the recognitions that libraries have to make is that there will always be a very dedicated group of people. Support may be dropping, but the passion of the people who support libraries is unmatched in some cases. It's a repository of original documents, some very obscure documents, and the like. But the challenge is to say, how do we stay relevant in today's world where data access, information access, is not a difficult thing to do? So part of it is being a resource for those who don't have that easy access because they don't have access to the internet or to other resources. But part of it is going to be selling the fact that libraries can help people to make sure they're learning the right information, the true information, and I think that is part of the challenge. I met with the chairman of Ways and Means in the House. We all have the opportunity to sort of go in and make our pitch. And local aid issues are always important to me, education issues, a few others. But what I kind of group at the end of the discussion for him is what I call Cinderella programs and services, things that we get a lot of bang for the buck on. And I include libraries in that discussion. Adult day health programs for elders, one of the very important programs. Clubhouses for people with disabilities, very important program. The kinds of things for which we get a really great return for the investment we make. And I include libraries in that, and I'm hopeful that we will continue to get the support at the state level and continue to get the support at the local level, because I do hold dear my memories of the importance of a library in my life, and I know that it also serves that same purpose for my children. But if we're going to make sure it remains that way for the entire population, then I think we have to recognize what the role might be in today's society. So thank you all for coming together. We are all accessible. There is a library somewhere near every legislator. Make sure that people reach out, not just preach to the choir. Thank you. The newest member of our delegation, who is working very hard on Beacon Hill for you. Peter.
Thank you, everybody. I'm going to keep my remarks very brief. They say on Beacon Hill that there's a direct correlation to the amount of time that you've served to the length of the speeches that you give. So mine will be very short. I'm just going to say, you know, I'm going to look at this as a little bit from a different angle, in that throughout my early years, I certainly spent time in libraries because as a kid, that's where you went to do some research, to read books and whatnot. But as I grew a little bit older and started going to high school and college and whatnot, I found myself spending less and less time in libraries. And as I started to continue on into adulthood, I started personally to think that that libraries were becoming a little bit irrelevant. In the age of the internet, what do we need them for? You know, is it becoming that important? Is this something that's going to become a relic of our time as we start to progress into what they call, of course, the information age? And as I ran for state representative, and now that I am on Beacon Hill, I find that the exact opposite of what I thought is what is actually true. As I started to visit libraries, I am constantly amazed that those using the library continues to increase, that they become community centers, that they become places for kids to come in to find a little bit of shelter from the world and really explore. And I think that's one of the main topics that we see here, is that kids come in, they explore. I personally, as I walk around libraries, I look through books and whatnot, and I think, oh boy, that's one I'd really like to read. And by the time, after about 15, 20 minutes, you've got about 20, 30 books that you'd like to read and no time to read them. So I'm happy to say that my perceptions were completely wrong, and that libraries are something that we need to support and support vigorously, that we need to bring more of a community sense to the libraries, and I think Margaret and everybody's doing that, especially with the literacy programs that take place here in Southbridge. It's just a wonderful opportunity for the community to come together, and I see a strong role even as we do move into the information age and into an age when we become a little bit disconnected in society, more stuck with our hands on a keyboard and our faces glued to a screen, that libraries provide a very vital function for us. So again, I'm very happy to be wrong in that aspect, and I want everybody to know that that I am in full support of libraries and the initiatives in the work that they do. So I just want to say thank you very much for changing my perceptions and let everybody know that we're here for them as well. So thank you very much. Let me see if I'm introducing anybody, am I? Let's see, we'll go down the list. Mary Rose. All right. We'll invite Mary Rose up.
Good morning, and thank you all for attending, and thank you to the legislators who are here and their supportive words for libraries. I will be brief and let Rob Maier, the executive director, talk about the legislative agenda, the overall legislative agenda, but I want to focus my remarks on the local legislative agenda, the insert for the Jacob Edwards Library that is in everybody's packet today. There are two sides to the local insert, and I want to address the wording here first. Tip O'Neill always remarked that all politics is local. And as far as libraries are concerned, it's even more than just local. It's personal, the personal stories. And the local insert here talks about the money that the state dollars put toward local communities, local initiatives. And so all the dollars that are available through the statewide program come back to the individual public libraries. Some of the benefits are actually to the local school libraries. And for example, the databases, if an individual school tried to pay for the databases that we provide statewide, either through Mass Library System or through the board itself, it would cost $43,000, dollars that can be better spent locally on local initiatives. And on the other side, because I did see children here, I will mention one of my favorite books. We've all talked about what children benefit from their local public library, access to books. Again, the patron-centered universe. But one of my favorite books is Stone Soup. It's a story about how a community gets together. I've never really addressed a budget in terms of a stone necessarily, but when everybody puts a little bit into the pot, all the communities benefit. And what we have here is the Wheel of Fortune, and in recent years it's been the Wheel of Misfortune in terms of budget cuts. But when you pull all of the resources together, whether it's the board, it's for Perkins and Worcester Braille and Talking Book Libraries, local state aid, the Mass Library System, or the Library for the Commonwealth, which is the Boston Public Library, when we pool all of those resources and work together and all the local communities put a little more into the pot, we're all stronger for it. We really appreciate the support that our legislators give us in terms of the budget. We do want to restore some of that funding, which is at 1990 levels. It would be nice to be able to move forward. We appreciate all of your kind words and hope that in the upcoming budget discussion that you remember us as important centers of the community and important resources, not only for the small children, but the students at Boston College, which is a great library for your son's thesis, because I was a student there before Doug Flutie, and I was a librarian there after Doug Flutie, and I can guarantee there was more money for the library after Doug Flutie than there was before. Thank you very much.
I'm pleased to introduce Rob Maier, the Director of the Mass Board of Library Commissioner.
Thank you, Joan. Thank you all for being here this morning. This is a great turnout. I just want to start by saying when I walked up these stairs this morning from the parking lot, and saw this wonderful sculpture, I felt right at home. Because way back when, a very long time ago, my grandfather was an organ builder. So he made things like that. So I feel right at home here. And I understand this sculpture is going to travel, and it actually comes from an organ that was in a church in the town of Dana, which is now under the Quabbin Reservoir. So Dana lives on in this sculpture too. I do want to talk about our legislative agenda for the coming year. I'm just going to first do a little housekeeping and explain some of the things that you found on your chair this morning. So we have an invitation to participate in Library Snapshot Day, and this is an invitation for everyone. It's an invitation to libraries to participate in Snapshot Day, but it's an invitation to everyone in the audience to go to your library on or about April 12th and be pictured using your local library. So we're looking forward to that. We have this handy bookmark with some facts about library use in Massachusetts. We have more of these. If you need more, you can give us a call. We also have, Mary Rose mentioned the insert for the Jacob Edwards Library. You have copies of that. But we have an insert for your library. So every public library in the Commonwealth has an insert like this. They're on our website. You'll be receiving an email, maybe this afternoon, from me, pointing you in the right direction. So you can get your own copy of this and help tell the story of how state funding helps your library in your community. And because I didn't see that Jim Izat is on the speaking agenda, I just want to point out that you've also got a flyer from the Worcester Talking Book Library. The Talking Book Library programs are very important in every community statewide. There are users of this program in every community. We serve the state through the Worcester Talking Book Library and the program at the Perkins School for the Blind in Watertown. Worcester has a very specialized program, which is providing large print materials. Now, everybody who's eligible, you don't have to be blind to be eligible for the program, because you might be thinking, why large print? So people who are visually impaired that cannot read regular print are eligible for this service, and it's all provided through the Worcester Public Library program. So just a word about that. And inside the legislative agenda, you've got a green piece of paper, which is the budget history of our accounts at the Board of Library Commissioners. Senator Moore mentioned that we are down about 39% over the last 3 or 4 years, and that's true. We, along with most other state programs, have tried to weather the fiscal storm. And we know that there is a storm, and we know that the storm has not completely blown over. Driving here this morning, I think I saw part of another storm that didn't blow over. I wasn't really looking for it. I happened to look over at a hillside off to the left as I was coming into town, and I thought to myself, what on earth is going on over there? It looked like, you know, deforestation. And then I noticed what looked like a logging operation. And then, of course, I noticed the homes that were destroyed. So libraries have, among the things libraries are doing for their communities in this difficult time, is providing a place of refuge for residents of the community in times of real trouble. And that could be a natural disaster, like a tornado. It could be the economy. It could be the need for access to computers and the internet. It could be the need to learn English. This library has a great literacy program. So our public libraries are much more than the books that are in the collection. Our public libraries are really part of their communities. And each public library finds its own way to be part of its community. I was at a legislative breakfast a week ago in Arlington. A speaker there talked about what a difference the library made in her life, and she said that really happened because the library invaded the community. The library invaded Arlington. And what she meant was the library had reached out into her community and figured out the services that her community needed and how best to provide those services. And libraries all across the Commonwealth are doing this. So this is why we do have an aggressive legislative agenda this year. Certainly we recognize that most public library funding comes at the local level. That's why it's important for every library to reach out to its members of the legislature, bring them into the library, and show them all the wonderful things that the library is doing, and talk about the needs. So on average, local support for libraries is about $38 per capita. That's a statewide figure. Your numbers will vary from that. And about $3 per capita comes from state programs. So the state programs help every library be better than it could be on its own. We're all about trying to provide equity of access for all of the residents of the Commonwealth, wherever they live, work, or study. That's our role at the Board of Library Commissioners. So programs like the Massachusetts Library System, Carolyn Noah will talk a little bit more about that. The Mass Library System is providing services that link up libraries, the delivery service that moved over 14 million items last year among libraries, the training, continuing education programs provided to library staff all across the state. The Library for the Commonwealth, also funded out of line item 9401, Boston Public Library, an entirely recast program. The purpose of this program now and going into the future is to help libraries digitize important local resources. Every library has materials that it holds that are specific to its community. And those materials are the real target of this digitization effort, to get that history out to members of the community and to everyone around the state. At the Board of Library Commissioners, yes, we say here statewide reach, small staff. That's true. We are an entirely statewide operation from one location. The governor's budget has been very good to our programs this year. The governor calls basically for level funding. We think that's a great start. We're very thankful for that great start. There's one positive exception, which is that the governor has put money in his budget to restore funding for our second public library construction position at the Board of Library Commissioners. We will completely lose that position at the end of June if the funding is not restored. That's the major thing and the only thing we're looking for the Board of Library Commissioners specifically. Public libraries hold about 37 million items statewide. The state aid program opens up access to those resources for all of the residents of the Commonwealth for communities that are certified in the state aid program. And we do have a few communities that are not certified in that program, but we also do have 340 communities that are certified in the state aid program. Technology, things that sit kind of behind the scenes that help our libraries operate as efficiently and effectively as possible. You're going to hear a little bit about CW Mars, the network that serves this area of the state. There are networks that serve the public libraries and other libraries all across the Commonwealth. And these networks are the technology that's behind the scenes. They're what allow the library to automate its resources, to check out materials, to place holds on materials that give you as residents the opportunity to go into the library's catalog and place holds any time of the day or night. That happens about 6.5 million times every year. And then the MLS delivery system moves those materials to your local library. We also use funds from account 9506 to license electronic content. That's some of that avalanche of information that's coming at all of us. The licensed content, we can guarantee you that it's high quality information. And it is something that's used in our K through 12 schools and our academic institutions every day. Most of the use is among students in one form of education or another. And it is a resource that our school library people use to train students in information literacy so that they know how to find good quality information. And that's a critically important skill in today's world and economy. So we ask your support for these line items in the state budget. We ask you to consider how these programs work together to serve your libraries. Just on the state aid program, one more thought before I conclude. Think about, folks from public libraries, think about what it would mean to you if there was to be, as we request here, if there was to be a 50% increase in funding for state aid next year. What would that do to your ability to work with your local officials to gain funding for your public library? State funding has clearly not kept pace with the funding that's provided at the local level for public libraries. So think about what that would mean. Think about what it would mean to have additional electronic resources provided through the Massachusetts library system if we're able to secure a $1 million increase for that organization. Think about what it would mean to your library to have staff from the Boston Public Library come out and help you digitize local resources if we can secure an $800,000 increase for that program. Think about what it would mean to your network if we can increase funding for network services through account 9506. Those are the things that we're proposing. Those are the things that we hope that you will support. And keep telling those wonderful library stories. Make library service real for the members of your community, for members of the legislature. You have those stories. You have to tell those stories so that everybody can hear them and understand exactly what libraries are doing, what your library is doing in your community. That's what makes it real. That's what's going to help advance our cause to provide the best possible library service to every resident of the Commonwealth that we possibly can, to grow our communities and to make the Commonwealth as strong and the best place to live that it possibly can be. Thank you very much for being here this morning. Let me introduce Carolyn Noah, the Assistant Regional Administrator of Massachusetts Library System.
Thanks, Rob. Good morning. I'm in the fortunate position that Rob has given much of my presentation for me. So I have just a little bit to add. The Mass Library System is sort of the quiet giant that stands behind libraries of all types in Massachusetts and helps them to do a better job. And with the increased funding in the legislative agenda, there's some very specific things that we plan to do that will help your library users in your communities. And will extend the mission of the Massachusetts library system to help libraries be stronger. So here's one of the things: access to a more robust suite of databases. Rob talked about the importance of those to students and lifelong learners. We're working together with the Board of Library Commissioners to make sure that we do the best we can with the money we have, and a little more money will make that go further. We expect also to develop resources to support the STEM initiative, which is science, technology, engineering, and math. It's so critical to our career development and the health of our economy that we do that. We expect that we'll be able to provide faster access to the Mass Library System advisory services and more robust continuing education for librarians and library staff when and where they need it. We're a small staff, and we extend as well as we can over the state. We need to explore ways to be able to have a further reach. We want to reduce local costs for interlibrary loans. Interlibrary loans happen when your library doesn't have the material that it needs on hand, can't get it in its immediate network, but you need it now. So there is a cost to doing that, and additional funding would help us reduce that and make the service more accessible. We also want to lower fees for MassCat, which is a network of small libraries who can't afford to be in big networks like CWMRs. There's a cost barrier for libraries to join that, and they're very small libraries to begin with. So this is a way to help bring them into the resource sharing universe. Finally, we want to improve efficiency for library circulation. I think you heard from Rob that 14 million items go traveling across our state from one end to the other, and every one of those items is handled by a member of your library's staff. Not without cost to their bodies, their equipment, their furniture, and it can be really hard, exhausting work. And we believe that if we have the opportunity to take a good look at efficiency and ergonomics, we can help improve the situation of people who handle all those materials every day. So those are our plans if we receive additional funding through the legislative agenda. I really appreciate that our legislators are here and interested and happy to hear about it from us. We appreciate your support, and I thank all of you for the opportunity to talk with you.
Next, we'd like to welcome Joan Kuklinski, who is the Executive Director of the Central and Western Massachusetts Automated Resource Sharing. Joan, tell me how to pronounce your last name. Kuklinski. All right, good. You're welcome.
Good morning, everyone. As was said, I'm the director of CWMRS, which is the Automated Resource Sharing Network that covers Central and Western Massachusetts. We happen to be the largest network. We have 150 libraries in the network, and those are multi-type, primarily public, but we do have a dozen academic libraries and a couple of school libraries. I like to think of an automated network like CWMRS as the infrastructure that kind of make the libraries function well in this 21st century. Where the utilities that get the power to the libraries where they need it. We provide the automated system, and just as importantly, we provide the vast telecommunications network that links all the libraries together, that can allow this resource sharing to happen. CWMRS provides the system, it provides training, it provides support, and we have librarians that go out and help train people. We have technicians that the library staff can call when something just isn't working correctly. We also provide electronic content, and that is becoming more of a challenge, especially with the plethora of e-book reader devices and so forth. We provide e-books, we provide databases. The e-books are particularly challenging. We like to think that we can leverage the cooperative buying power of these 150 libraries so that e-books become affordable. It's not so much the individual costs, but the subscription to have the most popular service that is available right now, which is Overdrive. That's $12,000 a year. That's before you buy a single e-book. So by leveraging that cost through the membership of 150 libraries, we make it affordable for all these libraries. Funding for the automated resource sharing networks has been cut significantly over the years from its high, and we receive less money now than we did in 1998. And unfortunately, many of the costs to operate a network like CWMRS are fixed. You know, we can't tell the telephone company or the data provider for telecommunications, oh, we can't pay the bill this month, you know. They don't take kindly to that. So what it means is that when we receive cuts in line 9506, that translates into higher assessments for the local member libraries, something they can ill afford in these economic times. The automated networks, people tell member libraries, directors, staff, they tell us that they couldn't function in a contemporary environment without the automated services of automated networks like CWMRS. And your patrons also benefit. I think one of my favorite stories relative to the importance of the service we provide is, it was years ago, but I heard from a library director that a mother came in to use the internet resources in a library. And at the time, internet wasn't widely available, and it's still not widely available in many of our communities out in Western Massachusetts. And her child had been diagnosed with a pretty significant disease, and surgery was being recommended. And because she was able to go on the internet and research that disease, she found an alternative treatment and more information that allowed that child to avoid surgery. And to me, that really drove home, how the information power of the internet can change lives, and how we as librarians, by providing this service, can also help change lives. And that happens. I also want to mention a particular program called the Small Libraries and Networks program. And this is a grant opportunity that is available through the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners to help our smallest member libraries afford the cost of network membership. And it provides an annual grant to offset those costs to make it more affordable. We have many more requests for those grants than we have funds available. And the MBLC has been working with us to increase those funds, but the demand is still out there for even more. So one of the things that I hope will happen if we get an increase in line 9506, which is the line that supports the automated networks, is that we will be able to open up that Small Libraries and Networks grant opportunity to more libraries that would like to become circulating members of CW Mars. One of the other initiatives that we're working on highlights our efforts towards collaboration and cooperation with other entities. We're working with the Mass Library System and an effort to extend high-speed broadband access to the parts of the state that really don't have it. And we're working with the Mass Broadband Institute, which received both federal and state bond money to create a high-speed fiber network to connect the libraries. And many of our member libraries will be able to take advantage of these high-speed connections, and we're working to help make that all happen as seamlessly as possible for the member libraries. So we work in many ways to help the libraries serve their patrons better, and we hope that we can enjoy some of the benefits that would accrue to us if we were to receive extra funding towards that effort. It all takes money. But we hope that by working together, we can lower the cost of doing business and provide outstanding library services to the member library patrons. So thank you for your attention. That's it.
Thank you, Joan. I like to say my name, Joan. Next is Erica Travinsky from the from the Southern Worcester County Educational Collaborative. She is the vocational coordinator there. Thank you, Erica. And then we're going to ask Kathy Nicola to come up for a minute when Erica's finished. So, please.
Good morning, and thank you for having me. I'm here to share one of those personal stories about the Jacob Edwards Library. Every day I have the pleasure of serving students with intellectual disabilities in a vocational program. And about 2 years ago, I contacted Margaret to see if there were any opportunities for our students to come to the Jacob Edwards Library and volunteer. And through some collaboration, we were able to come up with a program that offers both volunteer opportunities as well as the opportunity to come and be part of the local library and to access the services that are provided through this library. So our students come here with the support of a job coach several times a week, and they do jobs around the library that perhaps the staff here wouldn't be able to do otherwise. So it's really turned out to be a beautiful partnership between our students and the library. Our students are able to learn skills, job skills, social skills. They're able to learn how to access the library and all of its resources. We've also gone on to collaborate for Project Bread, which Mr. Clark mentioned earlier. Our students came here 5 days a week this summer through the use of some grant funds to provide children in the community with food that they might otherwise not have had while they weren't being served in the school. So it's been just an amazing opportunity, and we look forward to continuing that opportunity. And I'd like to thank Margaret and all of the staff here and the Jacob Edwards Library and all of you who support the library to provide this opportunity to our students. So thank you.
Thank you, Erica. Kathy, would you like to come up and say a few words? I'd like to introduce Kathy Nicola, who is the chair of the town council for the town of Southbridge and a big library supporter. Thank you. Well, while I have the microphone, I also just want to thank Margaret and the staff at the library for putting on this event.
Thank you. Thank you. Just take a minute of your time. I grew up in this community, and as a child, spent an awful lot of time in this library. And because of that, it inspired me to go on in college and get a degree in English and in journalism because of my love of literature and books and learning. And one would think that was enough. Today, this library does an awful lot more than that. And the services that are provided here are amazing. From all that is done on this level to downstairs, the children's services, and the literacy volunteers, which is not part of the library, but is part of the library, and a very big part of this community. I want to thank all of you for coming today. I want to thank Senator Moore and State Rep Peter Durant, Town Manager Clark, and all of you for sharing. Very proud of our community, very proud of this library. Thank you again. Thank you, Margaret. As always, it's wonderful. Your staff always does a great job. Thank you. Bye now.
Senator Moore has a postscript.
Representative Durant said you could talk as long as you had served, and so I didn't talk as long as I had. But I do want to, we've had a lot of good upbeat information, and you have a lot of support from the legislative delegation. But I don't want people to leave here thinking that, oh, this is all easy, and there's no problem with increasing funds, because there is difficulty. First off, as the economy has shown some signs of improvement, everybody who has taken cuts the last 3 years thinks now's their time to finally make up and go back to what they were getting when things were on the upswing. So the competition for those dollars is greater simply on that fact alone. The other is that the legislature is not going to add new taxes. The Speaker's made that clear. I don't think there's any great appetite in the Senate either, and there's about $250 million or so in additional new taxes, soda and candy tax, cigarette tax, expansion of the bottle bill, that are not likely to happen. So increased revenue is not on the table other than whatever growth provides in the way of new revenue. And thirdly, the state and the communities have benefited over the last few years from something that some folks like to criticize, known as the federal stimulus program, but it has kept us be able to fund schools and local police and fire and other things. And that's gone, that's done. And if you read the papers or look on the television as to how much activity and positive stuff's going on in Washington and how much money's coming out of Washington, you're reading a fairy tale if you believe that there will be any money coming, and it's going to be just the opposite. New funding is difficult. So I don't want anyone to go home and say, oh, this is all set. And we're going to have, the board has said this is what they've asked for, and of course it's going to happen. It isn't certainly unless you continue to lobby. There's I think no one mentioned well, it's in one of the pamphlets, the State Day at the State House on April 30th, I believe it is. That's probably right after the House might have done the budget. I think they'll do it the week before that. So we'll know better whether the House has been able to do anything different than what the governor's budget is, but it may not be the same. I doubt that it'll be higher, certainly, than what the governor's recommended, because unlike the federal government, we do have to balance the budget. And so it's going to be particularly important that folks from the library world make an effort to be there and visit with legislators that day, and certainly in between now and then, to visit with us in our, out in the district or wherever you can, or communicate in one way or another, first with the House, certainly, because they take up the budget first, and then with the Senate, in an effort to underscore the importance of how these programs affect you and your community directly. Because it is going to be a continued battle. We're not, as I think several have said, we're not out of the woods yet on the economy, and a lot of things could go wrong. We keep watching Europe, and that's not particularly encouraging. So this will be a continued effort. It'll be very important. Communities are going to be struggling for local aid, because some of this is considered part of local aid, but it's going to be a continued area that we're going to have to focus on over these next couple of months. So I encourage you to not only study the material, but to communicate with us again, and also broaden the conversation in the communities with other folks, so they understand that both community support and state support are important in order to continue to provide the services that are provided, not necessarily simply to expand, but even to do what we're doing is going to be critical. The groups that are coming in to see us and fairly regularly requesting money, they're saying, oh, if we can have level funding, that would be good. Well, the requests are more than level funding, so that's going to be more difficult. So to the degree that we get what's asked for, or even something in between what you're getting versus what's asked for, is going to take some real effort on the part of the people throughout the communities to say this is a priority service and we need to do it. So I encourage you to take from this meeting not only the information about the good work that's going on throughout the library system, but the need to maintain it and hopefully improve it is going to take some real advocacy here in the communities, and then at the State House when you come in on the 30th. So I think it's been a great program. We've learned a lot today. But we need to get that message back, and we need to, for whatever, I'm sure our colleagues are at other breakfasts, because this time of year on Fridays we get a number of different invitations to different groups. And so the folks that are from our area, represent our area, who aren't able to be with us this morning, you need to get the word to them as well, that this is something they've got to make a priority in the coming months as we wrestle with the competing demands for those rather limited resources that we have. And keep that effort going. So go out and start knocking on doors or whatever you have to do. The banks are right across the street, so that might be a good place to start. But I think it's going to be important, and I know my colleagues share that we don't. It's not a bottomless pit and not a rising pit very much. So it's going to be important to keep that advocacy going. Thanks.
I just want to emphasize what the senator was saying about the governor's budget versus the House budget. I mean, you're doing the right thing by the legislative breakfast, and that's where you're going to talk to the legislators around the state. But the process, of course, is that the governor puts out a budget, it comes to the House puts out a budget, it goes to the Senate then acts, and then the House and Senate will conference the two different budgets. The process and timeline is the governor's budget is out. The House will put a budget together the last week of April. So if you come in on April 30th, you're going to find a whole bunch of House members out of the building taking a lot of aspirin, because the week before they would have fought that budget fight, and you're going to be a week late in terms of when you're coming in to actually talk to folks in the State House. So I would urge you to either consider shifting that date or being sure you do not wait till that date to reach out to at least House members, because we are talking about the budget